Hey guys, this is Redrame here, and this week I'm going to be trying out something a little different for the Unit Design Challenge that I've been put in charge of recently. I had a lot of people saying that they actually mostly submitted units due to the feedback portion of the challenge, where I go through and take the top few units and kind of discuss why I picked those, what aspects of the design I liked, and then how I made my decision as to which one actually won the challenge. But I thought that was kind of a silly way to do things, because the people who are probably actually most looking for the feedback are the ones who have designs that are maybe a little bit less polished. So I thought that, since I have to judge the designs anyway, I might as well go through, make a quick video. This is not by any means gonna be a polished video. I'm not gonna edit it at all. But for people who wanted feedback, I figured I might as well just record myself while I'm judging. Maybe give people a little more insight on how I do things or what I'm looking for. Obviously, not that you should try to appease me. Like, submit what you want. Doesn't matter to me. I enjoy seeing all kinds of different submissions. I'm not really looking for anything specifically, but, in case people are curious, I thought I'd give this a try. It might be a one-time thing, but if people like it, then I might keep doing it, and I figured it was at least worth an experiment. So I have all of the submissions on Reddit, obviously. Those are very easy to find. I also went through on Discord and found all of the units that were in the unit and game design thread. And I compiled the ones that fit the design challenge criteria, which, for those who don't know, design a unit that costs at most one of each resource besides gold. And besides resources that are like specific costs, like attack. And that's a relatively broad category, so there were quite a few submissions just from the design challenge. I'm not sure if all of these were intentional submissions. I also might have missed one or two by accident, so I apologize if I did. But nevertheless, I'm going to treat them all as design submissions. If the same user submitted multiple designs that I liked, I only count one, but I do consider all designs. It's just the easiest way for me to do things, and it's also the most fair way to do things, because otherwise, if you have to appoint one unit to design, to submit, and then, I decide, I like a different one, you get into some weird situations there. So, with all the introductory stuff out of the way, I'm just going to start. Usually I just compile all of the submissions into like my own notepad, but since it's way easier for a video, I'm just going to use Reddit. I'm going to go through like a preliminary round here, upvote units I like, downvote units that I don't think are probably going to win, and then just basically, for the Discord units, delete them after I read through them, if I think they're a bit flawed, and then kind of just slowly whittle down from there. I usually go a couple rounds, get a little more strict each time, and then it usually boils down to like 2, 3, 4 units, and then those are the winners, and I kind of just throw an arbitrary ranking from there based on what I feel, are the most cohesive designs out of those. So it's a pretty loose process, but it's a pretty loose process for a pretty loose contest, so no harm, no foul there, I would say. So that's... I keep finding ways to ramble, but we should probably just begin here. So, Vendium scrap. Nothing, 1 supply, 1 health. Nothing is pretty fitting for... So, lifespan 1, click sacrifice Vendium scrap. Version 18.3b. To gain 2 and exhaust 4 one of your drones. It can't do anything until 4 turns later. There's a bit of a blurb here. I feel like I ought to do it. I usually try to read these, although I usually won't click show replies. There's one unit in particular where I did click show replies just because I noticed that it was a repeat submission and it also said do not consider. So I was a little curious when I saw that, but other than that, I have kept this button hidden, and it's also in contest mode because I was debating whether votes should be hidden or not, because I think it is important for people to give feedback to the designs, but I also think that it can influence me to some degree. So it was requested that I put the threads in contest mode, so we're going to try that for a while. Anyways, so this is a Vendium scrap. Vendium scrap, a design that's already in the game. So I think, obviously, the idea is to balance out player advantage. But the problem with Prismata is that I don't think there's really a problem with player advantage. Like, this is just in a vacuum, not even considering the specific scrap. With player advantage in general, like a 52-48 is one of the best statistics I've seen in pretty much any game of this type. In terms of, how favored one player is versus the other. Recently, I've been playing some Gwent. It's definitely not 52-48, I can tell you that much there. But you have variations within specific stats, and I think it's very hard to fix with a unit like Vendium Scrap. There are a lot of different versions that have been suggested. There were 2 that were put in the game for a little while. Alex in particular, I think, had a very interesting one, but because I'm definitely not going to appoint a Vendium Scrap, so I'm just going to hit the blue button for now. I think that's kind of out of the spirit of the challenge. I think you're supposed to make something new. Obviously, that is nothing against the design of this unit. This is actually a pretty interesting design, I would say. It's kind of like a reverse Vendium Scrap. You can gain 2 and exhaust 4 one of your drones. It's kind of like a reverse Doom drone if you ignore the blocking ability. I'm not actually sure how strong that is. I'm trying to... that's kind of like... it's also kind of like Overwork, except it's a temporary drone sacrifice. That was a unit from forever ago for the April Fool's event. So because of that... That's an interesting idea. Obviously, you buy it when you want it, and then you click it. You have to buy it the previous turn, and then click it the next turn. That's also kind of interesting. So it gets telegraphed. Exhaust for one of your drones. I think this is a unit that might just get used at high inflation. I don't think you would actually use this to fix openings. And I think that's kind of against the point of Vendium Scrap. So I'm also going to say that this specific version of Vendium Scrap, I don't think actually... Because early on, this price isn't really worth it. You're exhaust-4ing one of your drones just to gain 2 gold. But later on, this becomes a really strong ability, I would say. And it really has nothing to do with player advantage. It's just at some point, 2 gold immediately is going to be more valuable than 4 turns of a drone. So I'm going to say no to that one. I've probably stayed on that one for a while now. So next we have Stalled Wall, which is just 1 blue, 3 HP blocker, build time 3. It's a nice simple design. I have to do a little bit of inflation math on that one to compare this to regular wall. So just going off of theory here, obviously problems with the estimations aren't perfect, but 1 blue comes out to about 8/3 if you assume that your Blast Forge is getting proper value per turn to compete with buying drones. So in comparison, Prompt Wall is worth like 20/3 because 5 + 5/3. So if you want to, I'm not going to do this for every single unit, but for the sake of showing how you would go about balancing these units, and obviously you don't just rely on these. You need to actually play the units before you're putting them in the, like, if these units were actually going to the game, you wouldn't just run a calculator. You would test the units. It's much more effective, but just in theory, you can go. So the difference between a prompt and a build time 3 is 3 turns. So you would go 8/3, and then we assume drone inflation just because it's very easy to do. The way you get this number, 1.33, is by considering that a drone costs 3 and an energy, which is a small consideration. Technically, it's slightly less because of energy limitations, but you basically, it costs 3 and you get 1 per turn. So 1 gold per turn can be bought for 3 gold. So because of that, your valuation per turn comes out to this. So this is 8/3, and then you can really just do 1.33 cubed because you multiply, like, these 8/3 could be used to buy a drone, which would then mine, which would then mine, which would then mine. And then that gold gets used to buy more drones. And obviously you can't buy fractions of a drone. It doesn't work in game. But this comes out to 6.27 gold, which I would say for a build time 3 wall, in comparison to 20/3, which is 6.66, this is actually about fair. You would want this unit to be stronger than wall, otherwise it wouldn't be bought. And at drone, or at least at drone inflation, you'd want it to be stronger than wall. And I don't think it's also particularly oppressive. It's also an advanced absorber, so it's fine if that's maybe a little on the good side. So I'm going to say, obviously it's not exactly the most inspiring design in terms of, like, you know, whoa, this unit is like nothing else in Prismata, but it's a nice, simple design. I will definitely revisit it. And there's also not really a unit like this. Obviously, the unit I picked for the last design challenge was also a high build time absorber. So maybe that's why this is maybe that's what they're going for here. But I do like the balance behind this unit, and you know, it's nice and simple. It works. So I will at least revisit it. Chances are I won't pick this. I think this is too simple. Just like it doesn't really feel like a unit that would be an advanced unit. Like, it's a little on the simple side for that, I would say, and also maybe a little bit clunky. But we'll see. So next we have Omega Pixie, 1 RBG, so 1 HP, and then just sacrifice, gain 2 attack. Not very innovative, but then again, I think this is actually relatively innovative in terms of a trinket unit. You don't really see this type of trinket unit because usually you want like a red sync or a blue sync or a green sync. But this costs RBG, and it's pretty rare that you would want to sync RBG. Now that being said, the balance of this unit is pretty seriously off because I think this unit is already like worse than Pixie because it's much harder to use as a sync. But adding a blue and a green just to get 1 attack, that costs, you know, using the estimation from earlier, that would cost 3 gold. And 1 attack is definitely not worth 3 gold in most situations. So this unit, it's a red and a green, so it's only 7/3 additional, but that's still definitely not worth adding to a Pixie, and Pixie's already a unit that you would only buy when you're trying to sync tech. So it's an interesting idea, but it's horribly misbalanced, and I don't really see how you would balance this. If you made this like 3 attack, I think that would just be too strong. If you made it RBG, that becomes kind of iffy because obviously there's Cluster Bolt in the game, but in general I think Cluster Bolt is specifically supposed to be the one unit that doesn't cost gold for attack. And also might still be too strong. RBG, that adds up to 4. Yeah, that's just a good exchange. Like, I can't really see how you would fix this design, so I'm going to downvote it because of that. But I think this type of unit, I'm not going to, like, I'm not docking it because it's not very innovative. Obviously, I upvoted the unit right above this one, which is Stalled Wall. Probably not the most innovative design, but I'm docking it just because I'm not sure how I would balance it, and I don't think this particular version is a good design. So are we allowed to submit more than one? I just answered that a while ago. Yes, you are. Maybe the rules make that unclear. It technically says, like, your submission. Yeah, it says submit one. No, I'm kidding, but I kind of do that for you, is what I would say. Just dump units on the thread, and I will submit one for you based on which one isn't garbage. Kappa. Obviously, I don't mean that, but, you know, I go through the units first, and then I consider I factor usernames in when I'm evaluating units, just because it's easiest to automate. Anyways, so we have Illusionist here, 1B for supply. When bought, consume a Blast Forge, construct an Animus. That's kind of interesting. So this idea of consuming a Blast Forge and then constructing an Animus being able to tech swap is a cool idea. The problem with this specific version, like I like this, I definitely do like these types of ideas, and I think Prismata could definitely use a unit like this. But the specific problem here is that you have a Blast Forge switching for an Animus, and it costs 1B. So this is clearly not an efficiency-based unit, which is good. You don't want people buying Blast Forge and then buying this unit to buy Animus. Like, that wouldn't be a very fun or interesting unit. But you, at the same time, would never really want to go from a Blast Forge to an Animus. You would want to go the other way around as the game goes on. So I think this unit's hard to use and would be... I think it's... Well, obviously hard to use is fine, but I think it's too hard to use. I think a unit that's both inefficient and the opposite direction from what you would actually want is kind of not a good idea. I think it would be much more interesting if this was a unit that switched your Animus for a Blast Forge. And then you made it inefficient in exchange, because that's actually a really good thing to do in the late game, but also you really want to be able to start with an Animus in most sets. How I would cost that could probably not even cost that. Like, if you have an advanced unit and you want people to use it, you could probably cost that pretty aggressively. Like, I would say 1R for that is probably fair, and people would probably at least sometimes use that, but also not, like, totally abuse it. 1R to consume an Animus and construct a Blast Forge. Maybe even cheaper than that, but that might be getting aggressive. So good idea, but I'm going to say the execution on this one probably isn't there. So Sabbats, we have 1B, supply 10, 1 HP, lifespan 1. Click pay 4 and sacrifice this. Destroy a prompt unit with 3 or less health that was bought last turn. A prompt unit with 3 or less health that was bought Okay, that's kind of interesting. Wait, so a unit that... The way I'm reading this is you can't destroy... Wait. So last turn, meaning the unit is destroyed when it was prompt. Okay, that's kind of interesting. So it's a unit that you would buy for 1B, and then to enable it, pay 4, and then destroy the unit. So this is... I see what LaFelle is going for here. Oh, it's lifespan 1. So you only get... So if your opponent doesn't buy a prompt unit, it just doesn't activate? That's interesting. I'm going to say that this is a pretty serious limitation. Like, it kind of has the Nevo charge effect, where the idea with this unit is you buy it in the late game, and then your opponent's forced to buy a prompt unit, and then you get to click this. But the thing that's awkward about that is I don't think that's even a very great deal. This price adds up to a wall, and you have to pay some of it beforehand. Some of it you pay after half a turn after they buy the wall. So it's not. It doesn't really have the potential. It doesn't really have the ceiling that Nevo Charge has as a unit. And I think because of that, this unit probably wouldn't get bought very much. I want to say this would be a fairly easy unit to rebalance, though. You could make it. You don't want to make it B, because then people will just be spamming Sabbats as a tech sink, rather than actually considering when they would buy it to destroy a wall or maybe a force field or whatever. So I'm actually not sure how you would recost this. You probably make the clickability cost less. You probably want the reward to be higher. Make it like click pay 3, or maybe even click pay 2. Probably click pay 3 is aggressively costed enough that people would try to use this unit. So I don't think it's a bad design. I think the specific version probably would go in and do almost nothing and maybe not be that fun to play with. You're also going to be spending, by the time Saboteur is any good, you're going to really need this blue on walls. So there's that to consider as well. So I definitely think you have to cost it pretty aggressively. I'm not going to upvote or downvote this one. I am going to look at it again. But chances are, I'll give it the up. I've said I would either upvote or downvote, so I'll upvote it. I'm not going to count this one out. It is a very interesting idea. But I would say perhaps a risky design to implement. Beta Rezo 4. 1 green, blue, red. So Rezo 4 plus a blue. Supply 1, 2 HP, build time 5. For start a turn for each non-drone unit left alive at the end of the defense phase, gain 1 attack. So you pay a blue more, and then you just also get an attack for every single engineer. And like all the other units. This unit has a lot of similarities to Rezo 4, except it's more broken, and you just spam engineers instead of actually being forced to make any decisions. And it's incredibly broken with Antimacomet, so this is an easy downvote. It's a cute idea, but that's about all I can say in favor of this one. Hyper-Focus Drone. We have 1E for supply, 2 HP. Additional cost, consume a drone. Frontline, start of turn, gain 2. So you consume a drone, you pay 1E. So it's kind of like a wild drone, except it has less HP, but it also costs less. You're paying 1E for a drone, but then if it dies, you lose a drone in addition. I think I had an idea similar to this one once. It's kind of a cute idea. But I want to say, maybe I've just been tortured enough by Wild Drone. I think this would be a very risky design to implement just from the fact that it's a frontline drone. Obviously, Lunark loves their frontline drones. They've managed to defend Wild Drone for this long, being in the game. But how would I compare Hyper-Focus Drone to Wild Drone? If it dies, it's a little worse than Wild Drone dying in terms of efficiency, but it's not even that much worse. And this drone is so efficient that you would absolutely buy this. So I think this drone's pretty off balance. I think this drone's stronger than Wild Drone. And I think Wild Drone's already on the strong side for a unit that can be so snowbally and kind of ridiculous. So I'm downvoting this one. So I should mention, I'm not sure how I would rebalance this drone. And also, I think rebalancing drones Units like this one that are relatively simple, I am going to criticize much more for balance than units that have crazy effects like Beta Reso 4. This unit I downvoted because just the design is silly. And, like, depending on what units are in the advanced set, even if you assume this unit's balanced, it's either going to be way overpowered or underpowered if you balance it for the average set. And that's going to lead to a lot of unfun games. So I didn't downvote this unit because it's imbalanced. I downvoted it because I don't think the design would work well in Prismata. But for units like this one, the design here is basically the alternate drone. And it's a relatively simple unit, so you kind of do have to judge it based on what's put on the table here. I think it's kind of cheating to balance drones for these and assume that this unit's balanced. Because it's pretty hard to find a cost that works well for these types of units. So next we have, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Perv Eyes. We'll go with Perv Eyes. And then 1B, supply 10, 2 HP, blocker, build time 2. Where have we seen this before? Oh, right. We saw it. Stalled wall. So it's a very similar idea, obviously. I could tell you off the bat, since we had to do the calculation for stalled wall, this unit is weaker than stalled wall. I might as well redo it here. 1B is 8/3 again, so 1.3. So we have 4.71. But then you also have to take this whole quantity and consider that it's only 2/3 of a wall. And you get a unit that's worse than wall at drone level inflation, which again, our estimation makes it so that drone level inflation isn't actually quite 1.33 in the real game because we're discounting energy. And you can't just buy drones for 3 whenever you want. But that being said, this unit is definitely weaker than the other one, and also for an advanced absorber, would probably be too weak in game and not very interesting. It's kind of interesting in that you could buy a Blast Forge earlier than normal and then have something to sink into for defense. Like if your opponent's threatening to force you to buy a wall, but then you don't want a wall. But I still don't love it. It's kind of a simple design, and I also think it's a design that, if it was put in the game, wouldn't be used very often. So because of that, I'm going to give it my downvote. Next we have Junk Mail, real-life friend of mine. We've got Explosive Drone here. Costs GE, 20 supply, 2 health. Winbot, consume a drone. Start of turn, gain 1. Click, sacrifice this, and construct a Gauss charge. I feel like I've seen a design that's similar to this one before. I don't remember where. Definitely not on this thread. But anyways, I kind of have to reread this one. So it costs a green, an engineer, and it consumes a drone. So it's basically just a drone that you can sacrifice for a Gauss charge when you want. But you have to pay a green and an energy to do it. This is an interesting design because at the fastest you'd have to buy Explosive Drone, then consume the drone the next turn, and then finally the Gauss charge would hit. That being said, this is definitely not aggressively costed enough. I'm on the fence as to how much to penalize for that, because this unit's sort of like middle of the road. It's not like it's an alternate drone, but it's also got like multiple components to it. It's not just like a unit that produces gold. I think the idea is neat, but I'm going to say this one's too far out of the park balance-wise, just because paying a green and an energy up front to then take an ability that is normally negative value. You would normally rather have a drone than a Gauss charge, even at very high inflation, because you can just hold... if you hold a drone for 1 defense, if your opponent has explosive drones, you're just trading drones for drones. And then your opponent had to pay green and energy to actually activate their explosive drones. So I'm going to say this is too outlandishly weak. And I'm also not entirely sure how I would fix this. There are quite a few variables to tweak. It's probably possible to do, but this design definitely wouldn't work. And we have Time Capsule, which I believe was submitted to Discord as well. Although I think I didn't copy-paste that one. I'm going to have to check later if I copy-pasted units that were already in Discord. And I might also have to double-check, make sure I didn't miss any. Now I'm feeling like I missed some. I'm not going to bother doing that now. That's just me being paranoid. So, Time Capsule costs 1 of everything and an attack. Gain 15 sacrifice in 3 turns. I believe this is a unit that I actually provided feedback for because it was posted to Discord like faster than any of the other units, and I was still around. I usually try to ignore the design challenge. I usually try to ignore the Discord until I'm actually judging units. But I couldn't help myself in this case. This was originally gain 10, which, even if you assume the attack is free, is kind of like net neutral, which means that this unit's really horrible because it's so hard to set up, and then you would also have to get like a Blood Rager type effect out of it for it to even be okay. Gain 15 is obviously a lot more payoff. It's an interesting idea for a unit. Like, I think this type of tech sync would be interesting to see in the game, just because you normally don't want this type of tech sync. I'm not really sure. So it's build time 3. It feels like it would still be a pretty niche unit, and maybe too niche for the game. Like, I feel like for this crazy of a tech cost, you kind of want a unit that does something. Like, that's an unfair criticism. You could definitely have like a multi-tech trinket unit, but I don't know. I'm a little bit torn on this one, to be honest, because it's such a simple unit, and it's also a very hard unit to evaluate in terms of how strong it would actually be. I'm leaning towards, even with 15 gold, this unit generally isn't that strong. But if you can actually deny 1 absorb with it, it becomes pretty strong. I'm going to upvote it because I want to come back to it. I think this is a fair design. I'm just not sure how to evaluate it compared to the other designs that have gotten past me, but that's a challenge for future me. I don't see anything wrong with this design, so I'm going to upvote it. So Nitro Keeper, 1 green, 10 supply, 7 HP. That's a lot of HP for 1 green. That's my first observation, but I assume it's got some flashy effect. Fragile, consumed. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Consume 2 drones. Gain X. So it's sort of like a mini Venge Cannon so far. Click pay 2 HP and pay a red to construct a prompt Nitro Cyb. Okay. That's a lot to take in. That's a pretty flashy unit, I would say. So first off, the clickability is obviously part of the valuation here. The original unit, 2 drones for an attack per turn, roughly even trade, I would say, in most cases. And you're also paying 1 in a green. But you do get 3 prompt nitrocides for 1 red. So this unit would I think that is impactful enough. That's a relatively complicated calculation, but I can tell that this unit's actually in the ballpark of what you would utilize, and also isn't imbalanced. I want to say it's maybe a little on the weak side, if I had to guess. Obviously, you would not use this in a breach-proof strategy. It's not like Venge Cannon like in that way. This is a terrible breach-proof enabler, and if you use the click ability, which is the only good part of the unit, you would have a 1 health attacker, so you're not going for that route at all with this unit. There's nothing wrong with the design, I would say. So, because of, like, I don't see any glaring flaws, so I will give it an upvote. Please ignore, this is the unit I was talking about earlier. Peon, build time 4, start a turn, gain X. This is actually one of couple things that motivated me to start doing this. Was seeing this unit twice, in addition to the people who are saying, yo, the feedback is great, please, please keep doing it. This was the other indicator to me that these videos might be helpful to people. You kind of do a similar thing here, except instead of comparing it to Wall, you compare to Tarsier. And if you evaluate this at 2, like, this unit is absolutely nuts compared to Tarsier. Like, it's ridiculously strong. And also, unlike the absorbers, which it's okay for advanced absorbers to be significantly better than Wall, this unit's an attacker. And, like, some of the strongest attackers in the game are not particularly that far ahead in efficiency of base set attackers. You have like a much smaller advantage there in terms of efficiency, because if you have a ridiculously good attacker, that just breaks the game's core mechanics, because you just immediately rush it. You would ignore absorb. Absorb has to be better than attack for the game to really be functional. So this unit would totally break the game. I would go as far as to say if Peon existed in the game, you would go turn 1 Animus as both players. That's probably correct strategy. And next we have... Oh, I forgot to downvote it. But it says please ignore. Sorry I didn't ignore your unit. I immediately forgot it said please ignore. But next we have Rockpile. 1 in the red. 20 supply, 1 HP, prompt blocker. Start of turn, construct 2 Nitro Size with build time 1 for your opponent. So 1 in the red, 1 health blocker, and it's prompt. My first observation is 1R prompt blocker is a strictly better husk. And then I just noticed it says struck 2 Nitro Size build time 1 for your opponent. Apparently it is not a strictly better husk. It took me a little while to process the second line, because that's a pretty unusual effect for a unit to have. This unit is actively worthless, because if your opponent has 2 Nitro Size with build time 1, you're making 1 health and your opponent threatens to attack. And your opponent can just pop the 2 Nitrocides, and this is immediately -1 health for 1 red. So I'm gonna say I'm not sure what you were going for here. I assume you mean build time 2 and thought that build time 1 would result in a unit that comes in a turn and a half later. I think even if we give Helichaz here the benefit of the doubt on how the build time with clock works in the game, and say that this is build time 2, this unit is probably still too weak by a pretty large margin. And again, for a relatively cheap unit that's not that complicated, I don't know why I was struggling to read this earlier. I guess it's just because I noticed it was a little off balance, to say the least, and was trying to make sure I wasn't misreading it. So I'm going to say no to this one. Next we have Warmaster 93, upgrade equipment, green-blue steel splitter, 10 supply spell, and it swaps your steel splitter for a Xeno Guardian. Arguably, Xeno Guardian would still be buyable at 6G BB. That's not even arguable, that's just true. Assuming you're not competing against another absorber. However, this spell makes that cost spread over turns and reduces the tech investment needed. I think you've pointed out the exact reason why I don't think this would be a good unit to introduce into the game. I think the idea is cool. Absolutely, there should be more Steel Splitter upgrades, and absolutely Xeno Guardian looks like a unit that might upgrade from Steel Splitter. And I like the idea of trying to use a unit that's already in the game for these sort of like, consume a unit, construct a unit type, like few type units that upgrade. I think that's a really good idea. I am going to say the specific cost of green-blue Steel Splitter is technically not going to break the game. You could print, because it's an absorber, you have a lot more leeway on what you can do with this unit. And it is possibly still worse, it's possibly still worse than Xeno Guardian. But being able to get Xeno Guardian off one Blast Forge, when the only downside to Xeno Guardian, which is possibly the best absorber in the game, probably the best, not in terms of efficiency, but it's such a ridiculously flexible unit that means that your opponent automatically can't rush you down in any set ever. The only downside to it is it costs 2 forges to build. And I think negating that downside should be worth, you should make this a little more expensive to make it less obvious that you would buy this unit, in my opinion. Sure, there are some sets where Xeno Guardian is still better than upgrading your Steel Splitters, because this also does take an extra turn. It's a slower way to get Xeno Guardian. But, I'd say it's risky. I like the design enough, and it's technically balanced, so I will upvote it. But I'm going to say that I'm probably going to take this one out round 2, if I had to guess. The design is definitely cool. It's just, I would say it's a bit too aggressive in what it's doing. I think you could even cost this at 1 green-blue, and it would still be, it would do its job. You would upgrade a Steel Splitter into a Xeno Guardian, and then you wouldn't have Xeno Guardian spin. You would just have it as your absorber. Anyways, moving on, we have Tenebrae with Frostmite. Costs 1 red, supply 10, 1 health. Lifespan 3. Click, sacrifice Frostmite, chill 1. Okay. That's kind of an interesting unit. It's basically just Frostbite's little brother. It comes out faster. I will say Frostmite costs 1/3 of a Frostbite, and arguably even less, because at some point the red is going to just start decreasing in value as you're not able to buy good red units. The lifespan 3 obviously plays a factor, but if you ignore the lifespan 3, this is just strictly better Frostbite, pretty much. It's more granular. It's just as efficient. It's more efficient when you consider that it comes out a turn sooner. And the lifespan 3 definitely does not do enough to negate all that. I can tell you that without doing any math whatsoever. This unit is overpowered, and I also dislike the fact that it just costs R. I think that trinket units, there's nothing saying that they can exist. Units that cost tech but not gold. Obviously, Cluster Bolt does exist. But I think the advantage to Cluster Bolt is it costs a lot of green, and you have to do planning ahead of time as to when you would buy a Cluster Bolt in the future. And it's also not particularly efficient. But I think having efficient tech sinks that don't cost gold leads to pretty boring decisions. You just buy this unit whenever you have a leftover red. You possibly buy this unit over other red units, but the fact that you would just automatically spend your red on this leads to a pretty boring unit in my opinion. So I'm giving it a downvote. So we have Bucky here with Dronelet. 1 red energy, supply 20, 1 health. Start a turn, gain 1 exhaust 2. Okay, that's a cute idea. So it's kind of just Immolite for drone, whereas Immolite, Immolite is to Tarsier as Dronelet is to drone. And with that comparison, I would say Dronelet is slightly more aggressively costed than Immolite. If you make... Well, no, Tarsier's build time too. That's not true at all. Almost, just barely caught myself. I almost made a huge mistake there in judgment. I think Dronelet's actually just flat out not aggressive enough. Because at the point in the game where you would want economy, you wouldn't really want alternating economy. And this unit costs enough more than a drone that getting the economy fast isn't actually enough to make it more efficient than drone. I definitely don't need to do the math on that one. Like, 2 in an energy. I'm making sure that's not wrong of me. Just, yeah, no, for sure buying dronelets is worse than buying drones in the early game, which obviously not necessarily a bad thing. I think if you're having a burst unit or a burst econ type unit, you wouldn't want it to always be better than drone. I just can't really see why you would use this one though, to be honest. Like, as a red sync, I guess is why you would use it. But you're using a red sync to buy drones? I can't think of when that would possibly be, like, better than just buying, like, a Nitrocybe. Or, because, like, in the very late game, when units like Nitrocybe are too slow, you would just be getting your 1 gold back, because it would be very, game would be closing out. And in situations where it's not late game, like sort of mid game, when you would have red to spare, you're going to be buying Dronelet, which making drones not like... I just don't think there's a point in the game where you would buy Dronelet. And again, because this is a relatively simple unit, I think this unit is not aggressive enough, and the design is pretty much figuring out the right balance as to what to cost this unit. So I'm going to say this probably is a no-go. Deassembler. 1 green-blue. 4 engineer. We have 1 from SSP here. This is going to take a while to decipher. Deassembler. 1 green-blue. 4 engineers and 3 drones. 4 health, I assume? Alright. I'm slowly processing that. Turn, get to attack, 2 gold. Click, consume conduit, blast forge. Pay B to consume blast forge or animus. Build respective force field, steel splitter, or 2 build time 3 Tarsiers. Okay. So you're turning tech buildings into units with this. This is kind of a cute idea, but the fact that I still can't there's definitely too much going on in this unit. The fact, you already have several different components to what this unit does. It makes both attack and gold. It has a fancy cost. You have a click, and it makes several different types of units. So this, to me, saying that your click either does or does not cost a blue is kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of, design elegance. Like, you have to pay a blue to consume the blast forge, but not pay a green. This just doesn't make, I don't think it's even within the Prismata UI to do this, which I wouldn't immediately disqualify a unit for. But it's just so ugly that to read in that regard that I I'm tempted to downvote this one, but I'm trying to figure out how strong it would be first. Costs 4 engineers and 3 drones. So adding up the cost, just doing some theory here, would be around like that adds up to 21, because this is 4 plus 8 plus 21. 4 health, whatever. You get 2 attack and 2 gold. So the click has to be worth a ton for this unit to be any good at all. This is a terrible price for 2 attack and 2 gold. It's not that terrible, actually. I take that back. 2 attack and 2 gold. This is kind of this is kind of fair, but it's on the weak side. Consume Conduit, Blast Forge, or Animus, Force Field, Steel Splitter, 2 build time. I assume building the Force Field doesn't consume the drone. I at the very least, that's the assumption that this design's going under, I can tell. I'm not sure if you implemented this into the game. I want to say the Force Field would still consume a drone. I'm actually blanking on how that works now. There aren't really units that there aren't really construction effects for units that cost. I guess a stereo cannon in previous versions made a force field, so that part of the design is legitimate. Steel Splitter or 2 build time 3 Tarsiers. Oh, it's build time 3. I read build time 2, and I was like, that seems too strong. And I realized it was build time 3, and I think, that's not build time 2. That's kind of yet another unfortunate detail that makes this unit a little bit overcomplicated, presumably in an attempt to balance it, which I do appreciate. This unit actually, the more I read it, this does look like a relatively balanced unit. I think the price is about fair for what it does. I actually kind of like this unit. The more I read it, the more I'm warming up to it. So I'll give it another chance. But I want to say, you generally don't. Generally, if you have this much stuff going on, there's probably a flaw with your design. Like, I think this is a cool idea to put into the game, but it requires so much number tweaking that it ends up just being pretty complicated. So I'm going to move on before I spend forever on that unit, because that was a lot to decipher. Gauss Explosive, costs green, 20 supply, 1 health. Lifespan 4, click consume 2 engineers. Sacrifice all your Gauss Explosives, gain X for each. So if you have 4 engineers and 5 explosives, the example kind of Rezic to provide an example here. Clicking any explosive will leave you with 2 engineers, 0 explosives, and plus 5 attack. So you consume 2 engineers, and then you... okay. The example actually confused me a little more than it helped, because I wasn't thinking about the unit. I was just like, what does that do? So you click 1 once, and then you sacrifice all of them, and you get 1 attack for each. I'm not sure if that's doable UI-wise. But again, I'm not really concerned about UI that much here. You have lifespan 2, or lifespan 4, sorry. How strong is this? If you got, we'll consider the example just because it's here, and that makes it very easy. You would have to pay 20 gold for 5 explosives, and that translates to 5 attack. Or not 20 gold, 20 thirds. That sounds totally wrong. There's no way that can be true. So I guess a similar unit to compare to is Cluster Bolt. If you had 4 explosives, you're paying 2 engineers and You're paying... Well, it's also a turn... Oh, no, it gains X, so it's not a turn slower. So you have two engineer. You have to buy the 2 engineers the turn you buy the Gauss explosives to make sure you have them. That would cost 4, and then you would have 16 thirds. So that's 12 thirds, 28 thirds, and then you're getting 4 attack. Whereas Cluster Bolt costs... So it costs the same amount of green. You're paying 4 gold extra, and you're not getting the Gauss charge hitting your face. So this unit is worse than Cluster Bolt if you have 4 green, which is good news. And that's a sign that this might be a well-balanced design. Obviously, it's somewhat exponential because once you have the Gauss explosive, you're paying a green for 1 attack. And that's really good. But I think it would take... I think the requirement of having to stockpile a ton of green, I think is hard enough that this unit, given how bad it is with even 4 green, I don't think it would get out of control. I think people might try this strategy, particularly in high econ, but I don't think it would dominate sets. And I think this is actually a well-balanced design the more I think about it. And I'd be interested to see where it goes. This is one of my favorites so far, I would say. When I first read it, I thought, it was a little iffy to me, but I think this could actually be the type of unit that goes in the game, because it has the Cluster Bolt effect where you don't just automatically sync it, because you're making a green sync. Green can be stored. I think if you are going to make text syncs that don't cost gold, green is definitely much easier to work with because of that property. So this is a cool idea. We have Liana here. Green to red, 3 HP, 20 supply. Front line, click, choose, enemy target, bind 1. That's actually kind of funny to see. We have someone using the bind mechanic from the last design challenge. So my first observation here is 3 health for a unit that costs green or red that's frontline. Your opponent is probably never going to click. Like, I think the frontline keyword is probably wasted here. Like, green or red costs 2.5 gold. Even if your opponent's exploiting a wall, at that, or 2.5, I meant 2 1/3. I'm getting a little tired here. Voice is croaking a bit. Even if your opponent's denying wall absorb, it's at the point where you would consider killing an engineer over Liana, based on the cost. Choose an enemy target, buy 1, or bind 1. So obviously, I would at this point I'm basically just ignoring the fact that it's frontline. This unit would be basically the same if it wasn't frontline. And I'm just evaluating how good would this unit be if it was green or red for choose a target enemy unit, bind 1. Obviously, that depends on what you're binding. If your opponent's forced to pay an energy and keep an engineer on the board, could say that's... If you're binding every single turn, you could say that that's worth like 2 gold. I think because of that, this is actually weak. I like that someone tried to use the bind mechanic. Obviously, I'm not like, oh, look, bind mechanic. Obviously, it's an auto-include. But it is cool to see that people are actually building on the submissions that were here already. I will say that I think this specific unit, even though at first I was like, whoa, it's green to red, frontline for 3 HP for a green to red. There's no way you'd ever kill that. This unit's probably going to do something aggressively costing, and it's going to be OP, was my first thought when I read this unit. But when I read that it's just bind 1, this unit is actually underpowered, because it doesn't matter that you can't kill it. This is just a negative trade with an engineer on the table. So it's a cool idea, but I'm not really sure how I'd fix it. But the frontline tag is wasted here, in my opinion. It's overcomplicating the unit. And additionally, bind 1. I suppose you could buy multiple of these, and if your opponent's not able to buy multiple engineers, you could do kind of cute things where you bind the same unit multiple times. And then this actually potentially does something disruptive. But the fact that this isn't an efficient unit when it's trading with an engineer is a pretty bad sign. I think this unit doesn't really have a purpose other than buy it when you have nothing to buy with a green or red. Like, it's a red sync. Which is kind of interesting. It's definitely not your average red sync. But I want to say this unit probably has too many issues. But I am definitely glad to see an attempt like this. Anyways, next we have Kagito. I should read the blurb just to be. Opponent will gain defense momentum. Yeah, so it's just talking about the bind mechanic. Okay. Do you think it has a lot of potential? Yeah. The thing about bind is it's actually very low value. I think you would probably have to take advantage of the number and then have targets that are worth binding is probably how you would build a lot of these bind units. That's not to say you can't build a unit that binds 1, but it would have to be pretty cheap. Like, the fact that I'm saying GR is not cheap enough might be an indicator here. Anyways, moving on. Kagito. We have Trinity Strike. Green, blue, and a red for with 4 supply. 1 health. We have consume a Gauss Cannon, Steel Splitter, and Tarsier. Gain 9 attack and sacrifice Trinity Strike. That is quite a unit. So it trades 3 damage per turn for 9 attack, which in the late game is a good trade. That being said, it costs quite a bit in resources. I think it is an interesting idea for a tech sync for sure. But a green, blue, and a red would cost 4 in the vacuum. And that is kind of a lot for converting permanent damage into temporary attack. And the fact that you also need a Gauss Cannon, Steel Splitter, or Tarsier is sort of like an additional acquirement. So I think you have 2 downsides here when you really only need 1. I think you should either be rewarding people for going base set attackers. Probably not with a 9 attack nuke. The fact that this is a 9 attack nuke is also pretty scary, but, you know, good flavor. I think, like, because the unit is pretty expensive in terms of what it does, having a 9 attack nuke here is totally fine, because this unit's definitely inefficient. But I want to say it's probably too expensive, and you could probably get away with, like this is definitely with the flavor of the challenge. It costs 1 of everything. It does, like, this, the design is so cool, and you could rebalance this, so I do like this unit. I'm going to give it the pass. But I think the specific version probably wouldn't do well if it was put in the game. But again, this unit is flashy enough and well-designed enough that I'm willing to ignore that and potentially even make it a finalist. So we have Lazy Drone here. 1E, build time 3, click, gain 1, and exhaust 2. 1 health blocker. My first gut reaction is that it is gotta be too weak. Like, if you buy a drone and it mines 3, like, I definitely don't need to do the math there. This unit is simply too weak. Like, you're buying an Immolite drone that comes 3 turns later. Ugh, that is horribly weak. Like, I think both of these effects for drones could be potentially interesting ideas if balanced correctly. But A, I'm not sure how you would balance either of these individually, and I think B, lumping these together seems like not a very good idea. Since you have like a high build time drone, but then it's also an alternating like tempo-y drone. I'm not a fan. I'm gonna give that one a no. Antima Grenade. 1 GRB, supply 1 health, build time 1. Click, sacrifice this to target enemy with health 3 or less. Reduce enemy supply of that unit by 5. So my first... Obviously, there's no unit that currently interacts with supply. And that's probably the way that Lunar contends for things to be. But that being said, I wouldn't mind this rule being broken. I'm not going to dock it for being a unit that's about reducing enemy supply. I'd say the problem I have with this unit is just... it's way too weak. Like, the units where supply is most relevant are legendary units because the supply is 1. But your opponent has to have an enemy with 3 health or less to actually target that unit. So that means the unit's being bought. So you couldn't even use this unit to, like, deny Lucina or anything like that. If you could deny Lucina with this unit, that would actually be pretty interesting. And it would make sense that this cost was fairly aggressive, because once your opponent goes double Animus, you know, that's a pretty big commitment. And your opponent's going to be kind of screwed if they don't have a Lucina or something like that. I think even then this unit would probably be too expensive. Like, supply is not worth much at all, to be honest. Like, wall is not that much better than force field that you'd be willing to pay 5 to reduce the wall supply by 5. Not even close. And I think because of that, this unit's probably just all around too clunky. I don't think it's wrong to have a unit that interacts with supply, but when you're breaking a rule of the game, you kind of have to have a design that sells itself. And this unit definitely doesn't do that. Like, the fact that you have to target a unit that's already on the board and then interact with the supply, that might be good design, because if you could do things like deny Lucina, maybe that would just be too broken. But God, is this expensive for what it does, and I have no idea. Like, it's just such a pain to balance too. So I don't know what to say to this one other than it's not a winner. It's a cute idea. So we have Wildebeest. We have costs 1 red, 5 attack, if I'm reading that correctly. 5 attack, 2 health. Start a turn, gain 3 attack. Click, pay 1 red to gain attack. Alright, so the click ability is net neutral to slightly positive, but also, in addition, there's actually kind of like a unit conversion thing. This might break the conversion line. If you had an Oride core, you could click this and then... I'm not going to go into that. That's kind of a weird subject, but the fact that you could convert red to 1 gold with an Oride core is... it's kind of neat. I'm not sure whether that's something you could actually abuse and loop in weird ways. I've seen that. I've seen a lot of designs where there's just really weird stuff that can happen with unusual conversions that are actually efficient. Most conversions are balanced to be inefficient or neutral, so that you're not forced to do like weird stuff with undos. That being said, I don't think this really breaks that line. I think you could have this clickability in the game. It would be fine. The problem I have with this unit is it's too good. This is basically Erika Sadara It's except less interesting. You've got, like, if you have 5 attack, you just buy it, and even if you're not denying absorb, which by the time you have 5 attack, you'll always be denying absorb. This unit is just good. Like, it's ridiculously efficient. And then the click ability threatens another attack. You don't even have to use it, and it's already doing something. Like, even if you ignore the click ability, this unit would be way too strong. And I'm not particularly in love with the design, so I don't think I can give it leeway for that. Like, I'm not like, if you ignore the cost of this unit, I feel like this is the main part of the unit, is it costs 5 attack and then you get something efficient. But it's way too broken. I feel like that's the whole point of this design, so I'm not really sure. I don't think I can give it leeway. So I'm going to say no to this one. Next we have Faster Arms Race. Costs 1 gold instead of 8, and it's got the Arms Race cost. It's a spell. 2 build time. And then constructs the same units, but with build time 3. Okay. Or with 2 build time, sorry. So you'd get these. Then this would go to build time 1. Then this would attack, then this would attack. So you're only half a turn ahead of your opponent's units. Actually, not even half a turn ahead, because the Tarsier has build time 2 and your Tarsier has build time 2. So because of that, this unit's just flat out too expensive. We have a blurb here, so we'll read the blurb. No idea if it's balanced or not. Well, that's why I'm doing feedback this time around, in case it's useful for people. I will say that this unit is not balanced. It is too weak, from what I can tell. You're basically paying, that to get 2 first damage, give 3 to both players. You're worried about the possibility to spam it in order to get the breach. Yeah, you don't really have to worry about that. You're building Tarsiers, so whoever breaches first is going to win. You're not really worried about nuking with this type of unit. It has a high cost to it. It's a lot of tech. Like, sure, in the very late game, you would maybe consider buying this unit. If you happen to have GBR available. But if you happen to have GBR available, I say it's fine that people buy this unit in the late game. Any earlier than the late game, you're definitely not considering this. So just investigate. Absorb. Yep. A unit that denies absorb denial. That is an absorb denial. That is actually kind of a cute idea. I like absorb denial units, like Blood Pact. I think there should be more of them in the game. I think it's definitely a unit that fits within Prismata. I just think it's more the specific design that probably doesn't quite work out. It's also not really an absorb denial unit, because when your stuff has 2 build time, that gives your opponent enough time to plan and just build attackers rather than stuff that would deny absorb. So I'm going to say no to this one from Shadow Row. And finally, for the Reddit units, can't believe we still have the Discord units. I've been here for quite a while. Talking through has definitely slowed me down quite a bit, but I'm okay with that. So far, I feel like this has been going pretty well. I expected that I would be stuttering more, and maybe a little less clear, but I feel like I've done okay, and I've been reasonably fair with these, and not just like immediately been like, oh, this is trash, or anything like that. Anyways, Alpha Drone, Beta Drone, and Gamma Drone. So this is 3 submissions. I'm not. They seem to be kind of submitted together, so I'm not sure if like I like one of them but not another. If I would actually consider those. But let's read through them first and then figure that out. So you're sacrificing a drone. I like the elegance that there are 3 versions of this and that you could actually like that is cool. Purchase build time 2, so that's throughout as well. Beta drone is 3 health. And Gamma Drone is 4. Okay, and then they all have, like, flavorful things based on the resource you put in. But this constructs... You sacrifice a drone and then give your opponent a build time 2 drone. And then your drone is build time 2. So you're paying... like, 1 red and a drone for a symmetrical effect that your opponent gets to use first because the opponent's drone takes to build time 1 before yours. And then oh no, I was reading Alpha Drone. Click, pay red, consume a drone, sacrifice Alpha Drone, destroy target with 3 health or less. Huh. Consume drone, gain 2, gain 1x, gain G. So all of these do different things. Construct an oxide mixer, gain 1. I'm trying my best to understand what's going on here because there's a lot to take in. I would put this in the SSP category of units that have a lot going on, probably too much for what's going on in the game. Like, especially when you're considering new players, which I know is a meme in the Prismata community. Like, it's already pretty overwhelming to have to look through, like, 5 to 8 different units that you've never seen before at the start of every single game. So you definitely do want them to be legible. You don't want your opponent to have to spend 60 seconds and then not know what's in the set. So I think there is an inherent problem with units like these, and one that I reviewed above with the deassembler, and that people are just going to spend too long following them. But in addition to that, I think this is another one of the designs where the build, like, constructing it, the fact that you make it for you and your opponent, like, seems very clunky as a design to me. Like, this unit would... I don't think these units would be overpowered if you just made them sacrifice drones and then had up... Okay, they would be... I take that back. They would be overpowered the more I read them. But I think you could just balance these units so that they're not overpowered if you don't give one to your opponent. And that would make for a much more elegant design. You would get to take this line off of all of them, which is a little bit weird. And this also makes it horribly underpowered, because you're paying a 1 green, blue, or red and a drone to give your opponent the same unit. You're getting the exact same thing, but your opponent doesn't have to pay the cost, and your opponent gets it first. So these are just bad units, and because there's so much going on, like, I don't think I can give this design, like, a fair treatment in terms of assuming that they're balanced. I will say the direction I would go with these units: remove this line, increase the gold cost, and I think you have, like, reasonably fair designs going on. The effects are relatively cool. I don't see... Obviously, the Apollo effect potentially broken with, like, Lucina and whatnot, but I don't think that's a problem. I think that's something that, if your opponent has to play around, could be kind of interesting. You could get some mind games with that. Where, like, oh, are you going to snipe my Blood Rager and then let me buy a Lucina or something like that? Like, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with these designs. I think there are good units buried in here, but there's a whole lot of stuff overcomplicating them that doesn't need to be there. So I'm going to downvote it. And finally, we get the Discord units. Which first I have to check for duplicates. I accidentally copy-pasted Snowbird twice. These are the same, so that was just a mistake. I don't think I've seen I've seen Gauss Explosive. The rest of these look new. Okay. So, Snowbird, 6 gold red, 10 supply, 1 health. Start a turn, gain attack. Click pay red, attack to chill 3. So this unit's somewhat aggressively costed. It's like a Gauss cannon that costs a red instead of a green. But that's relatively fine. That's definitely not broken. The clickability, on the other hand, makes this unit broken. Like, this unit is basically a Drake that... It's 1 health, obviously, but, like, that's not gonna matter. You're gonna play this in a defending strategy. Snowbird, basically, you're paying an attack to chill 3, so that's a net gain of 2 threat. It's basically a Gauss cannon that can also threatens 2, for a cost that's less than a Gauss cannon. And the clickability is not bad enough to gambit around, so you absolutely could not put this in the game. It would totally break the game. Like, if you consider the fact that your opponent has to have 2 extra defense on the table at all times, that's worth a little more than 4 gold. So, you're getting a ridiculously efficient attacker. This would be by far the best unit in the game if printed. So, I'm going to say no to that one. It's a cute design. Maybe I'm being a little unfair, because you could definitely have a unit that looks like that in the game. In fact, I think there might be a unit, but, anyways, like, I wouldn't be surprised if I saw a unit that's pretty similar to that, but, I want to say there was even an event where something, I don't remember, but I think there was an event where something similar to that was printed, but we'll see. So we have Turbo, 3 gold, blue, green, red, 2 health. Pay 2 gold. Exhaust. Remove 1 from exhaust from a unit. So we don't have anything that interacts with exhausts right now. I don't know if this... Like, you could exhaust... Like, this would be tough to do with the damage calculator. It would require some overhauls there, because you could, like... You could remove exhaust from, like, an exhaust 1 Windsor, and then you get the threat immediately. This is something, because it was in the Discord, I couldn't help but read some of the context around these units, and that was one thing that people are pointing out that's absolutely true. This unit is pretty much only interesting with Windsor. There are not that many big exhaust units that do things. It's an interesting idea, but there's just not enough support for it in the game. Like, there aren't that many exhaust units to begin with, and they just... You could sig Isochronuses, that's kind of cute, but there's no way you're paying this much to do that. So I'm gonna no on that one. Magnum Cutter. I want to say this was submitted by Dark Ray, who already submitted a unit, if I remember correctly, but nevertheless, I will review it. Pay a green, gain 2 attack. So this is... I want to say this is aggressively costed, but it's definitely not broken. Maybe it's not aggressive. I'm trying to evaluate this right now. It's green, boom, pay, get. Yeah, this is a reasonably fair-ish unit, I would say. you know, it's simple enough. I don't really know if I love the design because you're pretty much never not going to be paying a green. Like, the advantage to designs like Perforator is that there's a real consideration to use them as defenders versus the click ability. Like, Perforator has a lot of different ways to use the unit, whereas Magnum Cutter, you just buy it and it sinks your conduit. Like, this might as well read 11 gold, green, blue, conduit. 7 gold, green, blue, conduit for 2 attack. Which is actually, when I phrase it that way, that's not that good. This unit's probably a little weaker than it should be, given that all it does is attack. But it does sink you out of conduits, which maybe could be useful in some situations, even though I would say green is probably more useful than either of the other 2 resources in the late game. So I don't really see what this unit does. So I'm going to go no on that one. Elusive Worker. 7 blue energy, supply 1. 3 health blocker. So we have a blocker. Click pay attack to gain energy gold. And then there were some notes in the Discord about whether this is a resource compliant unit, because you could do things like click Pixie, unclick Pixie, combined with this ability, and then reach a game state that you otherwise wouldn't reach. And that's a design rule in the game that that's generally something that the devs try to avoid, are situations where using undo actually creates new game states. I'm not too concerned about that kind of stuff. I look more for cool designs. I'm trying to figure out how actually like practical and good this unit would be. It's not prompt, so you're already paying more than a wall for a wall that's not prompt, and then the click ability is not particularly good. So I'm gonna say this unit's also just underpowered, and there are issues with like the resource conversion part of it, though not really a big one. You couldn't do anything unfair with this unit, really. So I'm not really sure what it's trying to go for. I think it's meant to be like a defender it's meant to be like a defender with flexibility. If you don't need the defense, you can do this other thing. But I don't think it really pans out, because I don't think the click ability is actually something you would really want to use very often. And it's definitely not worth buying to convert an attack into an energy into gold. So you'd have to get value out of the blocker, but you can't do this, so you'd rather just have a wall. So, definite no. We have next Anti-Ride Core. 4 supply, 1 gold, blue. This is from Masson. Only Masson would make a unit this memey. We have click 2 gold, gain an attack. So it's just a reverse Oride Core. You can spam clicks with it in Oride Core. That's kind of cute. But costs 1 blue. This is kind of just better than Oride Core. And I don't really see why a unit like that would be in the game. Other than, okay, it doesn't have absorb denial potential. That's why it would be in the game. So it's actually not better than Oride Core necessarily. I don't think you would ever buy this unit. Like, this is another way to read this unit, like, other than the fact that it has flexibility you can save the gold, which I don't think you would do very often. This is basically 1 blue drone for attack per turn. That's usually worse than Steel Splitter, even once the game gets a bit more heated. I just don't like it. Like, it's a cute meme. I will give it that. I appreciate memes getting submitted, but it's definitely not like an actual design that I'd want put in the game. Next we have Reeve. 3 gold green, fragile, 1 health. We have 1 health. I was reading yeah. The Discord formatting. So yeah. Costs 3 into green and it has 1 health. All units cost 1 extra gold to build for everyone, and its lifespan 3. Paying money for a symmetrical effect in Prismata is pretty rarely useful since the effects are already, the sets are already symmetrical. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. Like, symmetrical effects definitely could exist in the game. There's nothing saying they couldn't. But you're paying way too much for this one. I also think interacting with gold cost probably isn't a great idea. Your opponent, it does happen to your opponent first. And if you set up to build 1 unit, you could potentially get value out of this, but it's just so hard. It's most of the time this unit's ridiculously overcosted. So I'm gonna go no with this. This one's from Rift. I remember this one. Barrel of Monkeys. 1 gold and a green. 2 Tarsiers. Construct a build time 1 Reso 4. It's a cute idea. This is the other one that I actually was posted early enough that I responded to it. It's pretty good with Reso 4. And other than that, it's kind of just not very good. I don't think you would really want to pay... the thing about Reso 4 is you can store green for it. You buy the conduit, and you buy Reso 4, and then you store the green. But for Barrel of Monkeys, you don't really get advantage out of Reso 4 being build time 1 instead of build time 5, because 5 turns later, your Reso 4 is going to be more impactful than the turn you buy it, because of how green can store. So you're really just paying 2 attack. You're trading 2 damage per turn just for the ability to make force fields instead of Gauss cannons or Tarsiers or whatever else. And if you can make a ton of them, that might be worth it. But it seems like a unit that wouldn't get used very much, and it would probably get used in similar sets to where Reso 4 gets used. I think you would have Reso 4 plus Barrel of Monkeys sets for sure. That would be a combo that's worth going for a lot of the time. But then outside of that, you would have sets where Reso 4 would be so good that you buy Barrel of Monkeys. You're not really going to have sets where Barrel of Monkeys is better than Reso 4. And I think that's kind of limiting of this design. The name is very cute. I do have to point that out. This is a very well-named unit. It's got great flavor. Nevertheless, I unfortunately probably am going to give it the delete. And finally, we have Freeze Armaments. Cost of 3 gold, blue, red, and 3 health. Start the game. Change click ability of Steel Splitters. Wait, to gain... Oh, what? That is something that does not exist in Prismata yet. That's actually pretty neat. X is the number of freeze armaments you own. So basically, if this unit is in the advanced set, Steel Splitter becomes Amperilla. Huh. Oh, no, wait. No, Wait. Gain attack and chill act. Oh, okay. It's not Emperor. It's a little harder to read this unit with the Discord formatting. This is not quite as simple as the other units that were on here. So, gain an attack, and then chill 1 for each freeze armament you own. So you buy freeze armaments, and then every single Steel Splitter can chill 1. and then you buy another one, and they can chill one more. That's actually pretty cool, and hard to optimize because you have to figure out how many. I actually like this one. Like, obviously, this unit could be, if you scale big enough, this unit's just inevitably going to be broken. But you have to scale pretty big, I think. And you have to buy steel splitters, which are not exactly top tier main attackers. So I figured I was gonna get to close out the Discord tab and I wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. But this one's definitely a keeper. This is actually a really cool idea. So with that being said, let's do some revisiting. I'm going to try to make this much faster. I've basically given my feedback on all of these. Stalled wall, it works. It's kind of just uninspired, I would say. Like, it's not a bad design. It could go in the game, but I wouldn't call it a winner, I would say. And it might also be a little too spammable. Like, if you need to, like, the fact that it's efficient and a blue sync, I think this would definitely stall games, which makes it aptly named. And that's not terrible. It's not like you have a ton of supply. You have 10 of these. But I'm going to say no to that one, just because I've definitely seen units since that are a lot crazier. Saboteur, this is the unit that's probably not aggressively costed enough. But I liked the idea of it quite a bit. I still like the idea of it quite a bit, but we've seen some pretty... I would say, overall, this is a pretty good batch. I liked most... I at the very least enjoyed reading almost all of these. So... And the good ones were pretty good, from what I could tell, in terms of, like, actual balance. So I'm going to say Saboteur probably doesn't make the cut. Time Capsule, I think same thing, probably doesn't make the cut. Nitro Keeper, 7. I remember this. This is like the Venge Cannon Hybrid-y unit. It was kind of a cute idea, but I think it's a little... The fact that the Nitrocybus prompt feels like a little bit of a misuse of the unit, and it's a little bit clunky to me. Like, it is a Venge Cannon Fung Breeder crossover, and it's cute. I like it. I don't think I like it enough. We have upgrade equipment. This is the one that I thought was a little bit good for what it did, even though it doesn't necessarily look the part. I definitely am a sucker for these types of designs. I've come up with quite a few of these as well, and I think I totally want to see something like this in the game. So I'm definitely biased towards these sorts of things, but I don't think I'd want to see this specific one that much. So I'm probably gonna say this one's not the way to go. Disassembler or deassembler, I humored it, but it is really... There's really a lot going on here. I would definitely not want to actually see this in game. I'd want to see it cleaned up a bit. Gauss Explosive, I think, is a keeper. That unit's pretty cool. And I could totally see it going in game. Trinity Strike, cute flavor. I'm torn on whether to keep Trinity Strike. I'll come back to it, so I'll keep it for now. I don't necessarily think it's better than units that I've already unhighlighted, though. So, maybe it is. I think Trinity Strike's cuter. I'll keep Trinity Strike in the game. And then freeze armaments. I guess that's down to 3. Huh. I thought there were more. I guess quite a few of these were up here. Making sure that was actually correct then. For some reason, I got the impression that I upvoted more than I did. So time, yeah. I think I did keep the 3 units that I liked the most, and then I just have to rank them. Like, I'm gonna go with my first impression here. There are quite a few designs that could definitely work with a little bit of tweaking, or even with no tweaking. But I would say that first impressions can go a long way in helping judge from there. Just in terms of preference and what I would actually like to see in the game. I generally am biased towards designs that are not already in the game. So I'll rank the 3 that I still have, which are the 2 here and freeze armaments. Which Gauss Explosive and freeze armaments kind of do similar stuff. I would say from here, at this point, now that we have designs that we like, I would probably rank more based on the actual flavor with the design challenge. So Trinity Strike and Freeze Armaments both have the edge in that regard. They take advantage of, like, costing 1 of everything. Or almost everything. And Trinity Strike in particular has flavor with the base set, so it encourages that sort of thing going on. Whereas Gauss Explosive's just, like, a cool unit. It is a cool unit for sure, but I think it could potentially scale too big. It's the type of unit that's tough to balance. I think if you got it to a reasonable spot, it wouldn't break any sets, but it would definitely dominate. Like, it would definitely be prevalent in quite a few, and that could potentially be risky with Absorb. And you're gonna have a lot of sets where I think it sits on the back burner. So I'm probably going to say Gauss Explosive gets the bronze medal. And then Trinity Strike versus Freeze Armaments. Those are kind of 2 separate types of units. Trinity Strike is cool, but as I pointed out earlier, I mean, you can buy multiple of these. That's actually that makes the fact that it's expensive quite a bit more fair. I was a little torn on this one at first. But the more I read over it, the more it makes sense as to why it costs stuff. And it actually is a good... I definitely like this one. It's hard to coordinate, but you can do some cool bursty things with it. It might still be a little expensive, but obviously... I'm going more by concept at this point, because these are definitely concept type units that kind of balance themselves, based on the set. And like, if they're a little bit good, it's not really the end of the world. Freeze armaments. I want to say freeze armaments. The fact that it's like a start of game unit is. I don't know whether to weigh that against it, because it's a cool mechanic that I'd like to see in the game. Like, things that change how the game is played and interact with base set. Like, buying that Steel Splitter would definitely not be broken. Like, it just gives you the option to buy freeze armaments if you have several of them. I'm gonna say that's actually a really clever idea. I definitely like freeze armaments the most. Like, Trinity Strike feels like a unit where some unit of this type should exist in the game that exchanges attack for burst. But I'm not, like, particularly attached to this one. Whereas freeze armaments, I read it and I was like, whoa, that's actually a really good idea. So I'm gonna say that I've picked the winner, and I imagine pretty much no one has stuck through this long. But if you have, thanks for sticking with me, and hope you found this interesting. Let me know if you did. Obviously, if no one's actually interested, I'll just stop, because this was quite a bit more work than just doing the judging part of this. But I had a fair time. I can enjoy rambling a fair bit. So I'm definitely not opposed to continuing doing these. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next week with the next design challenge that I'll be posting pretty soon.